International Trade Theory. Hello friends, in today's session we will discuss topics such as gains from trade with increasing costs, gains from exchange and specialization, offer curves and partial and general equilibrium, analysis of equilibrium relative to commodity prices and terms of trade. Friends, let us now begin with introduction. We have studied that the nation will specialize in the production of the commodity in which opportunity cost is relatively lower. The main benefit of this theory is that it does not assume the labor value as the cost of production. The opportunity cost is explained by production possibility frontier. Neoclassical economists developed the concept of increasing opportunity costs. We will continue with our example of two nations, India and Japan, and two commodities, wheat and cloth. In isolation, the relative price of wheat is lower in India than that of Japan. Therefore, India has a comparative advantage in production of wheat and Japan has a comparative advantage in production of cloth. Now let us see the basis for and the gains from trade with increasing costs. As we have seen that the relative price of commodity is different in both nations. This difference in relative price of commodity gives rise to comparative advantage and creates the base for mutually beneficial trade. It means that nation will specialize in the production of the commodity whose relative price is lower in that nation. In our example, the relative price of wheat is lower in India and relative price of cloth is lower in Japan. Therefore, India will specialize in wheat and Japan will specialize in cloth. The specialization will continue until relative commodity prices in two nations become equal. In isolation, the relative price of wheat is 1/4 and 4 respectively in India and Japan. Now suppose the trade between two nations is possible. Therefore, India will specialize in wheat and Japan will specialize in cloth. Here in the figure we can see that wheat here is measured on x-axis and cloth is measured on y-axis. Here in the figure, gains from trade with increasing costs is shown. Let us now take the case of India. P is a point which is autarky equilibrium point. India will now specialize in wheat. It means that production of wheat will increase in India. Therefore, India moves right from the point P on its production possibility frontier. It incurs increasing opportunity cost in production of wheat. India moves from P to Q in production. India produces 13 units of wheat. India moves from point P to point R in consumption. At point R, India consumes 8 units of cloth and 7 units of wheat. India is now on a higher indifference curve, which shows that level of satisfaction has gone up. It shifts from IC to IC double dash. The trade triangle is RTQ. This triangle shows that India would exchange 6 units of wheat for 6 units of cloth with Japan. Now let us take the case of Japan. A is the autarky equilibrium point for Japan. Japan will specialize in cloth. It means that production of cloth will increase in Japan. Therefore, Japan moves left from point A on its production possibility frontier. It incurs increasing opportunity costs in production of cloth. Japan moves from A to B in production. Japan produces 12 units of cloth. Japan moves from A to C in consumption. At point C, Japan consumes 6 units of cloth and 10 units of wheat. Japan is now on a higher indifference curve, which shows that level of satisfaction has gone up. It shifts from IC dash to IC double dash. The trade triangle here is BDC. This triangle shows that Japan would exchange 6 units of cloth for 6 units of wheat with India. After having trade with each other, the relative price of the commodity in both the nations is same. That is, Pi by Pj equal to 1. At this price, India wants to export 6 units of wheat and Japan wants to import 6 units of wheat. Similarly, at this price, Japan wants to export 6 units of cloth and India wants to import 6 units of cloth. Hence, trade is in balance. Price other than this is not possible because trade would not be in balance. The main and important difference between constant and increasing opportunity cost is the degree of specialization. In case of constant opportunity costs, nation specializes completely. But with the increasing opportunity costs, nation will not have complete specialization. Here, India will produce 2 units of cloth after having trade with Japan. Similarly, Japan will produce 4 units of wheat after having trade with India. Now we will look at equilibrium relative commodity price with trade. We will start with partial equilibrium analysis. Here in the figure we can see that the equilibrium relative price with trade. In absence of trade, India produces and consumes at point E. At this point, relative price of wheat is P1. Similarly, Japan produces and consumes at point E2 at P3. At price P1, the domestic supply of wheat and domestic demand of wheat is equal in India. Similarly, at price P3, the domestic supply of wheat and domestic demand for wheat is equal in Japan. With international trade, the relative price of wheat will be between P1 and P3. Here in the figure which shows partial equilibrium analysis. If the price is above P1, the domestic supply of wheat is greater than the domestic demand for wheat. At price P2, the supply of wheat in India is greater than the demand for wheat in India. This is depicted by AB. It represents the quantity of wheat that India would export at P2. At price P2, the demand for wheat is greater than the supply of wheat in Japan. This is shown by A-B'. This represents the amount of wheat that Japan would import at P2. Here at price P2, the amount of wheat that India would export would be AB and the amount of wheat that Japan would import would be A-B' is same. Let us look at their offer curves. The concept of offer curves has been introduced by Alfred Marshall and Edgeworth. An offer curve shows the offer of a nation at alternate terms of trade. It shows the establishment of the equilibrium price ratio in the international market. The offer curve is also known as reciprocal demand curve. Now we will look at the definition. The offer curve of a nation shows how much of its import commodity the nation requires in exchange for various quantities of its export commodity. In other words, we can say that the offer curve shows all pairs of imports and exports implied by the production possibilities of a nation and the indifference curves. The offer curve is generated by varying the price ratio of the goods that can be traded. The offer curve of a nation can be derived from the nation's production possibility frontier, its indifference map and the various hypothetical relative commodity prices at which trade takes place. The imposition of tariff influences the offer curves. Similarly, economic expansion due to either factor accumulation or technological progress tends to cause a country to trade more at any given prices. The slope of an offer curve at the origin is the country's autarky price. In fact, India's offer curve lies wholly above a price line through the origin with slope equal to its autarky relative price, and Japan's lies wholly below such a line for it. Thus, in turn illustrates that trade equilibrium must be at prices that lie between the two nations' autarky prices. Now let us focus on the equilibrium relative commodity price with trade. Here we will see general equilibrium analysis. The international equilibrium occurs when trade between two nations is balanced. At this point, world supply is equal world demand in the market. The intersection of the offer curve of two nations determines the equilibrium relative commodity, price at which international trade will take place between them. At this price, equilibrium relative commodity price, international trade between two nations is balanced. Price at which international trade will take place between them. At this equilibrium relative commodity price, international trade between two nations is balanced. Here in the figure we can see that India's and Japan's offer curves have been shown in the figure. The two offer curves intersect each other at point E. This determines the equilibrium relative commodity price, which is Pi by Pj equal to 1. At this price, the international trade is balanced because India wants to offer 6 units of wheat for 6 units of cloth and Japan wants to offer 6 units of cloth for 6 units of wheat. Now we will focus on terms of trade. The terms of trade measures the rate of exchange of exports for imports. According to different theories of international trade, trade will take place only if it is beneficial for both the nations. How the gains from international trade are distributed depends on the terms of trade. We will now look at its definition. Terms of trade represents the value of the exports of a country relative to the value of its imports. It also refers to the relative price of exports in terms of imports. It can also be defined as the ratio of export prices to import prices. In other words, we can say that the amount of import goods a nation can purchase per unit of export goods. Types of terms of trade. First, gross barter terms of trade. The ratio between the quantity of exports and imports is called the gross barter terms of trade. The equation for it is TOTG is equal to QX divided by QM, where TOTG is equal to gross barter terms of trade. QX is your quantity of exports and QM is the quantity of imports. Next is net barter terms of trade. The ratio between the price of exports and imports is called the net barter terms of trade. This is also known as commodity terms of trade. Its equation is TOTN is equal to PX divided by PM, where TOTN is net barter terms of trade, PX is your price index of exports and PM is your price index of imports. We will now focus on income terms of trade. The concept of income terms of trade has been given by Dorrance. The income terms of trade is the net barter terms of trade of a country multiplied by its export volume index. Its equation looks like TOTI is equal to TOTN into QX is equal to PX into QX whole divided by PM, where TOTI is equal to income terms of trade, your PX and QX is equal to total volume of exports and PM here is price index of imports. This index takes into account the volume of exports of a country and its exports and imports prices, which are nothing but the net barter terms of trade. It shows a country's changing import capacity in relation to changes in its exports. Let us now look at single factorial terms of trade. The concept of single factorial terms of trade is given by Weiner. Commodity terms of trade do not include the efficiency and productivity of a factor of production. According to Weiner, the benefits of international trade can be explained appropriately if single factorial terms of trade are considered. Its equation looks like TOT-SF is equal to TOT-N into Fx, where TOT-SF is equal to single factorial terms of trade. TOT-N is net barter terms of trade and your Fx is nothing but productivity index of export industries. Now let us have a look at the double factorial terms of trade. The concept of double factorial terms of trade is also given by Wiener. Single factorial terms of trade do not consider the productivity of the factors which are incorporated in imports industries symbolically. Its equation looks like TOT-DF is equal to TOT-N into Fx whole divided by Fm. TOT-DF is double factorial terms of trade. TOT-N is net barter terms of trade. Fx is productivity index of export industries and Fm is productivity index of import industries. Friends, now let us summarize today's session. The difference in relative price of commodity gives rise to comparative advantage and creates the base for mutually beneficial trade. It means that nation will specialize in the production of the commodity whose relative price is lower in that nation. The international equilibrium occurs when the trade between two nations is balanced. At this point, world supply equals world's demand in the market. The intersection of the offer curve of two nations determines the equilibrium relative commodity price at which international trade will take place between them. We have also studied the terms of trade. It measures the rate of exchange of exports for imports. In the end, we spent through the basis of certain types of terms of trade.